the first Harvey's Hot Takes of the new year. First Harvey's Hot Takes of 2025. Here's Bryan Hayes. He joins us each week. And we're coming off the World Juniors. They finish up on Sunday in Ottawa. The USA takes gold in back-to-back years for the first time ever. Canada loses in the quarterfinals for the second year in a row. That's also the first time that's happened. Bryan, what was your overall takeaway with how this tournament played out?
Well, Jay, my overall takeaway was one of concern in terms of how easily Hockey Canada seemed to accept what you just stated. You know, the second year in a row, Canada loses to Czechia in the quarterfinals. First time that's ever happened. And Dave Cameron, after the game, said it played out the way he thought it would. You know, he thought 3 or 4 different teams could end up winning that tournament. And members of the executive team came out and echoed those statements the next day. And that, to me, is very concerning. We're on par as a hockey country with 3 or 4 other nations. Like, that's what we're concluding here. And as you know, and I think the whole country knows, the whole world knows, Russia wasn't even in the tournament. So Russia's not even in the tournament, and we're on par with 3 or 4 different teams. That, to me, is very concerning. You know, we throw around the summit joke all the time, right? Canada loses a game. Uh-oh, it's a summit. Something happens to a specific player. Uh-oh, there's a summit that's worthy of this. I do think it's a summit-worthy, maybe even a referendum-worthy comment or belief and belief system. If we've reached a point here collectively as a hockey nation where we're on par with upwards of 3 or 4 countries, because I don't think we can accept that, and we shouldn't accept that. We need to be able to puff our chest out as Canadians when it comes to the sport of hockey. That is our sport on the international level that we have owned forever, and we better hold on to it for a long, long time, because the truth of the matter is we don't have any other sport like it. We have other sports that can consistently get better, right? It's specifically on the men's side. The basketball team, the national team, has been great recently. Made the Olympic Games for the first time in 24 years. But they're not going to be on par with the Americans. That's just not going to happen. The men's national team in soccer made it back to the World Cup for the first time since '86. We're never going to be Brazil. We're not going to be Spain. We're not going to be a powerhouse. We are that when it comes to hockey, and I don't want to lose sight of that. I don't want the executives of Hockey Canada, the head coaches of Hockey Canada, to accept that we're on par with 3 or 4 or 5 different nations. And it also got to a point throughout the tournament, and you said what you said about the Americans, where it became very clear that we're chasing them in terms of team building. That is also very concerning. When did this happen? When was this accepted, that we have to build a team thinking of what the opponent could be all about? That's not the way we operate in this country. It's the rest of the countries around the world that look at Canada and say, how are we going to crack that nut? How are we going to figure them out? Right? We build our best team. We bring our biggest. We bring our baddest. We bring our best. And we say, come get some. That's the way Canadian hockey's operated throughout my lifetime. And I don't want to lose sight of that. And that's what was concerning. You're not going to win every single year. You're not going to win the World Juniors every year. You're not going to win the Olympic Games all the time. It's not going to happen. And that's not what I'm suggesting. But it's a mentality thing. If we're losing sight of that and we're accepting that other programs have caught us or are right behind us, we better pick up our game. We better get to the bottom of that. And again, the Olympic Games, they're coming. The 4 nations face-off, it's coming. So if we feel like we've been caught on the junior level, that means we probably feel like we've been caught on the minor hockey level. It's really going to pop on the national level, on the men's side here soon, Jay. And again, we'll find out in about 5 weeks at the 4 nations face-off, but we will really find out in about 13 months when we get to the Olympic Games. And if we're on par with the Americans or behind them, or God forbid, we're on par with 3 or 4 or 5 different nations, again, forget a summit. We might need a referendum in this country to figure out exactly what's going on.
Last time I talked to you about the Detroit Lions, Bryan Hayes, they were coming off a high-scoring loss to the Buffalo Bills. The injuries were piling up, massive amounts of injuries, and you were not convinced that they were the team to beat in the NFC. Well, after Sunday night's decisive win over the Vikings, they are, for the first time in their franchise's history, the #1 seed in the NFC. Have you changed your tune about Dan Campbell and company?
New year, new me, new take. I'm back on the bandwagon, the Detroit Lions. I absolutely have changed my tune. Whatever I was saying in 2024, disregard that. It's completely blank page. We're starting anew. And I got to give all the credit in the world to the Detroit Lions. I was so impressed with their win on Sunday night. And obviously the offense has been a juggernaut all year, and I expect that to continue into the playoffs. But with all those injuries on the defensive side of the ball, they made Sam Darnold look like he was back with the Jets. They made him look like he was at USC, right? Like they basically sent him back to college. They were sent in the house. They were covering stud wide receivers. They got a good run game there in Minnesota. They shut down everybody. And there's a Ford Field element to this as well, because when we were talking a month ago, there was a chance Minnesota could catch them. They had a chance to do that if Minnesota won on Sunday night. Didn't happen. There was a chance Philadelphia could catch them. Even the Packers were closing in on the Lions at that point if the Lions were going to stub their toe down the stretch. And they didn't. They got stronger and stronger once they got into the Week 17, Week 18 mentality. Them going to San Francisco Week 17, that was classic Dan Campbell, Detroit Lions football. They didn't have anything to play for, and they went in there and they punched the Niners in the mouth in Santa Clara. And then we saw what happened on Sunday night. So I think the fact that they're at Ford Field is a massive, massive advantage. Now they get an extra week off, avoid the wild card so they can get some rested bodies back. But it's not only about the Lions as to why I think they are now the pace car again in the NFC, and they're the team to beat, and I think they're probably going to get to the Super Bowl. It's that the other teams also have question marks. Sam Darnold did not look great under the lights on Sunday night. He still has to prove what he is come playoff time. My Packers, unfortunately, they are really stumbling going into the playoffs. I do not feel good about them at all. On the defensive side, the offensive side, Jordan Love's banged up. I don't think they get through Philly. But even the Eagles, who, again, I think will beat the Packers this weekend, what's up with Jalen Hurts? We think he'll return, but what's he going to look like? And, again, they have to play an extra game, which I think is significant, and then eventually go into Ford Field. So full credit to Dan Campbell, full credit to the Lions. I thought the gas was really starting to leak on them. I thought it was really starting to fall off. And they absolutely picked themselves back up down the stretch. Looked great in Week 17. Looked outstanding with the statement of the year, Week 18 at home in Mini. So, yeah, my tune has changed in 2025. I think it's the Lions in the NFC. I think they will end up going to that Super Bowl.
And also in Week 18, Brian, a lot of high-profile stars were held out of games, including Saquon Barkley, who had a chance at the NFL single-season rushing record. We know about the NBA. We know about the NBA struggles ratings-wise, and a lot of people are pointing the finger at load management and teams resting stars there for one game, two games, multiple games. As the whole, all across, I'm not just talking basketball and I'm not just talking football. All across sports, Brian, do you feel like the whole load management thing has gone too far? Because I certainly do.
Yeah, I think it's a real slippery slope, and I think it's gotten to this point, and we're seeing that in the NBA. I'd give you examples in Major League Baseball as well, where they're really prisoners to sports science and load management, and specifically pitchers, right? How often do we see every single season? We see a starting pitcher, usually a high-caliber starting pitcher, have a perfect game through 6 innings, and he hits his 75 pitch count. He's like, I'm out, and he's happy to pull himself out of the game. Right? Perfect game. And he's like, I'm not doing it because I threw the arbitrary number that for whatever reason is a science now and I can't possibly go past it because it's April and my arm isn't warmed up enough, or early May. The NBA, obviously, it's a real plague when it comes to the NBA. And I think a lot of people are turning on the league. And I think when you look at the NFL, when you look at the NHL, I really would be careful with the idea of supporting and really promoting the idea of bubble wrapping players and really forcing the idea that it's simply playoffs or bust. I hated the fact that Saquon Barkley didn't play. I hated that, and I hated it for the Eagles, and I'm really curious what it's going to look like when they get on the field against Green Bay this week. But that was a chance at a really, really significant record, a massively significant record. I think Barkley wanted it, but he had to fall on the sword for Nick Sirianni and the Eagles. And again, if you're an Eagles fan, sure, you'd love to see him at 100%, but wouldn't you want your cake and to eat it too? Why can't he reach that record at home against his former team, the Giants, and then be on fire come playoff time? I think that was a possibility. I got to look local on this. The big story in Toronto right now, obviously, is Austin Matthews and the injury he's been dealing with, and the Four Nations face-off, which we just talked about, Jay, just over a month away. Now, if you're injured, you can't play. Like, that goes without saying. I'm not saying if Matthews is injured, you should go out there and battle through for the Four Nations face-off. But if between now and then he feels like he can play, go play. And I support the idea of athletes wanting to play in 2025 because there's far too many guys who simply don't want to do it. They will call for the check and they will call for it happily and sit there and say, I'm putting my feet up, whether it's because of the playoffs, whether it's because of load management, whether it's because of a contract situation, right? We see it far too often in sports, and I think we're losing sight of the fact that we need to start saluting guys for actually wanting to play and realizing it's never going to be perfect. You can't bubble wrap everybody. Get out there and do what you can. Obviously, there are rare circumstances where you might make some exceptions. And if a guy's injured, I'm not saying he should battle through that injury for whatever reason. But if a guy can play, go out there and play. And I really think it's a slippery slope. We're seeing it in the NBA. We've seen it in Major League Baseball. You do not want to let it leak in to the NFL or the NHL, where it is a physical sport. We love that about the sport. It's a team sport. You want to go out there and lay it on the line, not only for your teammates, and that's a big part of it from an individual standpoint for athletes, but also for the fans who pay the price, who buy into it. You're trying to build up these events like the Four Nations Face-Off and others. I could go on and on, Jay. But long story short, I am concerned about where that mentality is going in sports, and I want it to stop. If a guy wants to play, let him play and salute him for it.